Any good underdog will tell you fighting your way to the top means knowing how to play the game.
We're Serrano and Brooke Kelly, founders of the Kelly Group and authors of the landmark book, The Game, Win Your Life in 90 Days.
For us, every success has been a battle, whether it's training for the Olympics, media coaching for the White House,
or having TV shows made about our book. Through our system, we transform millions of lives by helping top performers turn their biggest fears and challenges into a game they will win.
We've gamified our pain and struggles, and now we're talking to high-profile guests in unscripted conversations so you can learn the game they played to reach their success.
Get ready to learn, execute, and get pushed out of your comfort zone. Let's get ready to rumble. So I must admit that I am personally very excited, and I say that because, like all of you, I'm always looking to better myself, which is why we created our best-selling book called The Game, Win Your Life in 90 Days. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a 90-day challenge where you're asked to take on various areas of life. There are 12 choices. And it's interesting that our guest today is someone who's a specialist in the top choices that people make when we ask them, well, what do you most want to improve in your life? And I don't think that Jamie will be surprised that among the high-charging, high-performing people that we work with, that we often see at the top of the list is body and health. We also tend to see family and personal relationship at the top of the list. And that whether it's a person's spiritual life or what gives meaning to their life, that those tend to be the three top, quote unquote, areas of life that people want to improve in our 90-day challenge. So I'm very fortunate to have with us Jamie Hess. And I'd like you all to have a chance to be introduced to her in her own words, and it's not hard to find her. She's already an icon when it comes to the world of social media, does amazing work in all the areas that we just spoke about. So Jamie, if you would share a little bit about your background so that our audience can appreciate the tremendous value that you bring.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. And I love sitting here with you. So to give you the brief kind of overview of who I am, you can find me on social media as NYC Fit Fam. So my husband and I started this Instagram account, and it's so funny because, I'll tell you this, just to kind of set the room. I was in corporate for 20 years prior to making the jump to the talent side and to doing what I do now as a wellness expert. So I really come from like a business background, and my husband and I, we're not millennials. We're 40 and 60 years old. I never looked at being an influencer as an influencer wasn't a job to me. That was like, it was a job to some people, but it wasn't the job I was looking to have, right? However, when we started sharing our journey in health and wellness on Instagram, and it so authentically kind of hit like lightning in a bottle, you just can't ignore when a side hustle becomes a full hustle, but it's because it's your passion. It's because it's your passion. So I left the corporate world several years ago, and I struck out to do NYC Fit Fam full time. And what it launched was a television career. So I am an on-air wellness expert. I'm on everywhere from Dr. Oz to the Today Show to Good Morning America and beyond. I'm also I'm on QVC. So every week I'm on QVC several times a week. I am the ambassador for their proprietary athleisure brand. So it's kind of like their Lululemon, but it's like between you and me and the rest of your podcast listeners, it's cooler and it's half the price. So go to QVC. If you're not a QVC shopper, I highly recommend it. And then it gave way to this whole other channel in my business, which is the Big Ask. And that is my wellness coaching practice. And I will tell you, it's so funny. Oh, the other thing I do is I'm a podcaster. I have a podcast called Off the Gram. So my whole life had been very B2B and kind of B to mainstream media. I had never been so much in the trenches with people, consumers, day in and day out, other than corresponding with them in my DMs on Instagram. And I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. Let's be honest. It was a new platform for me. And I got to tell you, it's the most rewarding, exciting thing I've ever done in my life.
Well, that's a really interesting shift, right? Like, I think that given the way that our society is evolving, social media is evolving, I think that people are a little more fluid in their thinking. Certainly what's happened most recently worldwide, I think has created a lot of like, well, is there something else that I should be doing? How did you make that leap? Like, was it easy for you, or was that something that was a painstaking thing for you? How was that for you?
It's a great question. You know, it's funny. I used to speak on panels all the time in New York City, and I started noticing that when people would ask, it would be me and a few other mompreneurs or me and a few other social media stars, and people would always ask, how did you get to where you are? And one of the similar things that I was finding across everybody, all the panelists, we always all shared in common, hey, I've used a life coach, I've used an executive coach, I've used a wellness coach or whatever. And I thought, look at all these women being smart enough to go outside and to look up for a resource that can help them,
Mhm.
especially when you're an entrepreneur, because when you don't have a boss, it's really helpful to hire someone to help keep you accountable, give you
Right.
deadlines, organize your deliverables. And so
Mhm.
I had started using life coaches, executive coaches, and wellness coaches. And when I had been maybe about 3 or 4 years in to NYC Fit Fam being my persona, people were asking me all the time in my DMs, hey, do you do personal coaching? Can I sign up? And I used to say, no, I don't do that. That's just not part of my business model. And a friend said to me, I'm sorry, can I just ask you a question? Did I just hear you say you have people asking you to
Right.
provide a service that they would pay for, and you're saying you don't provide that service? And I thought, well,
Mhm.
that's interesting. But then more importantly, I just took a step back and I started it very simply. I started by offering to just take on a coaching client one at a time. I was taking on women one at a time and working with them as the premise to develop my method.
Hmm.
And as I built it and I built the archetype and I realized this step by step method that really works, which became the big ask, it became something that all of a sudden I realized it was at the core of everything that I did all along. I just hadn't realized it yet.
It's almost as if you have, or clearly you do have a calling. And literally, people were through direct messaging, they were calling you. And at first, it was, it wasn't what you may have thought or planned, but it's really what unfolded. And I can see how there was this sort of brick by brick process. You know, I do want to say that a lot of the folks who are familiar with our work know that one of the things that we had to crack the code on, particularly on Wall Street, where bottom line performance is at the end of the day, what everyone's looking for, was how do we take these great ideas that people have, these great initiatives, and how do you produce a bottom line result? So literally, we created this 90-day challenge, which has been made into 2 television shows. It's currently a documentary on PBS that shows the power of what happens when you apply the principles of a game to quote unquote everyday life. And yet, as we see what people are choosing to put in their game, yes, they're putting in business, but it's so admirable to see how like you and your husband actually share the things that have been successful for you. You've shared the lessons that you've learned, the journey that you've been on. I have to ask you, I too have a partner who I'm also married to. Do you find it challenging to be someone who's helping people with family, helping people with their fitness, helping them with their diet? And then, you're looking and clearly leading that life yourself. You're working with your husband. And I would imagine the same way that I work with my wife, there, moments of challenge. Sometimes the cobbler's children have no shoes. What challenges do you find that you run into being such a leader for so many and yet still looking to execute on the same things yourself?
I love that term that the cobblers children have no shoes. You know, it's so true, but here's the thing. My entire program, The Big Ask, was created because I am her. I am the sufferer. I understand what it feels like to have food shame, to feel like your brain is hijacked by food and sugar and the things that plague us as people, but especially many women. And I'll tell you, this came from talking to thousands of women all the time through social media. And I was hearing this consistent struggle with the same thing. Now, when I look back on my own history, and I thought, well, I've had my own demons to slay, my own dragons to slay, right? I was an alcoholic and an addict. I had food addiction. I had all sorts of, I call them the isms. I had all sorts of isms in my 20s that really ran my life. And here I was trying to be this boss babe in New York City. And on the outside, it all looked pretty good. But on the inside, I was crumbling. And so what I learned was that if you do that long enough, you can only keep up that facade so long. Eventually, the outsides have to match the insides. And I realized that the moment I was able to actually affect change was when I asked for help. So what I do with women is, and people, but primarily my function as a wellness coach, I work with women, is I teach them how to ask for hyper-local accountability help. Is that your husband? Great. Is that your best friend? Is that a family member? We figure out who it is. We figure out what it is that you need help with. And then we figure out how to make these targeted asks for help. And I have a step-by-step process that very closely mirrors many spiritual programs that I have gone through in my life in recovery, because these are not frameworks that came out of thin air. These are proven methods that work. And so I fit this kind of practice into that method. And I figured out how to appropriate it for women in a way that's really digestible, and can be covered in kind of the span of 8 weeks. And I always say, don't get ahead of yourselves. We do an 8-week group coaching boot camp for a reason. I take you through the whole trajectory and I put you out on the other end a better person. And the coolest thing is that by and large, what I hear time and time again is, yeah, I lost the weight. Everybody loses weight, but I came out of this with so much more. I improved my relationship. I learned how to stand up for myself. I learned how to communicate my needs. I figured out I don't have to do it alone. And then when I get things out of my head, it takes the power away from my fear. That's what I want women to walk away with. So what you're saying is exactly right. This all dovetails together, whether it's weight loss or business, it's all the same thing.
What I love about your title, The Ask, is because so many of us literally have shame around asking for things, particularly asking for help, right? Because the moment there's an ask, there's like this sense of vulnerability, like, well, what if the world says no? So could you just maybe have us understand a little bit better, like what is the ask?
Yeah, well, I would love to. So here's the big secret. The big ask actually starts with a big tell. And what you just mentioned is actually the core of the power of it all. It is in your vulnerability that is your power. If you cannot stand up tall and say, look, husband, partner, mother, whoever, I love you. You are an amazing person. This is why you're the only person I would approach with this ask. This is why our relationship means so much to me. That's part one. Part two, I got to be honest. And this is where you tell your vulnerability story. I have suffered with this type of kind of, mental obsession around food, or this inability to stick to a diet. I cycle through it. I beat myself up. I play all the mental gymnastics, but I'm in pain. I got to tell you, it's not just, can you help me stay away from the cookies? I'm in pain.
Wow.
And when approached in that way, people will want to help. And then the last part is making it really simple. This is not a laundry list of everything you need help with in your entire life. You got to figure out the couple of things that are your unhealthy habits that are keeping you stuck. And then we figure out what asks can we make so you feel supported.
Wow. That is so powerful, and I can see how that piece of authentically communicating with people, and a lot of the communication skills that we teach is about just that, having authentic conversation with people really allows them to get an experience of what's at stake, as opposed to some glib, like, yeah, I've heard you say before that you want to diet or that you want to eat the cookies. I think that is absolutely fantastic. You've changed an awful lot of lives. Remind me again, how many followers do you have on Instagram? And just kind of give folks an understanding of the sort of the scope of your work and how many lives you've had a chance to impact based on your own past painful experiences and the solution that you came up with.
So I have a little over 100,000 followers on Instagram, and that has been an incredible modality for me to get this message out before I even knew that I was getting the message out. And people used to say to me, I've lost 10 pounds, I've lost 15 pounds since I started following you. And I used to think, well, that's interesting. I wasn't even providing a solution-based message per se. Like there was no guardrails around it, like this is my program. I was just sharing what I do. And I think that is the spark, right? It's the authenticity. And so
Mhm.
now my program being a lot more targeted, I work with women both one-on-one and in a group coaching setting. But I get in there with them. I am in their everyday lives. If you're my one-on-one client, we are talking all day. If you're my group coaching client, we're in a closed Facebook group, and I'm giving it to you real. I'm telling you in real time. Hey, I had a hiccup this weekend. I fell off the wagon, a little bit on Saturday afternoon. Here's where I struggled. Here's what it looks like for me. Time to get real. Here's a come to Jesus, and here's how I fixed it. And I'll take them with me into my conversation with my husband. Hey, babe, you know what? We came home from Father's Day brunch. I got to be honest. I stuck my finger in the cookie jar, and it didn't make me feel so great. I was having a little bit of a sugar moment, and it kind of hijacked my afternoon. Hey, could you help me get those cookies out of my sight line? And secondarily, could you maybe give our boys dessert for the next couple nights while I get myself gently back on track? These are the little asks that we can make of somebody that they might see. I always say it's a simple program for complicated people, right? Sometimes the
Mm.
answer is simple, but it's big.
One of the things that, again, I'm probably one of your biggest fans because we work a lot with men, just, for the nature of work that we do. And again, high performing, hard charging individuals who are very successful at what they do. And yet I always find it interesting that when you ask them, well, if you could work on anything over 90 days, what would you most want to work on? And as often as I said, along with their own fitness, it's, family, it's their relationship. And in having one-on-one conversations, I know it feels really hard for them to be able to help members of their family or to help their spouse. And it sounds like you're someone who's really made a big difference for a wide range of people, but definitely women. And I know that that's something that, all of us who have mothers and daughters and wives definitely appreciate. I mean, what are you going to say to your wife? I think you could lose a few pounds. I don't think that that would go over very well. But yet, it just highlights like all the shame that we can't even have a conversation, that things get so weird around these subjects. Let me ask you, if a husband wanted to actually help his wife, his daughter, his sister, his mother, whoever, who was having, challenges around what they considered important, is there a recommendation that you might make or a way in which they can potentially be in contact with you to kind of forward that conversation? How would that play in?
You'd be surprised. I have husbands reach out a lot saying, this is really tricky and delicate, but I'd like to have my wife participate in your program. And I think that the best way to approach it is, obviously you don't approach it saying, I think you need to lose a few pounds. It's that I want you to be free. I want you to live your best, happiest, most empowered life. And I heard this chick talking, and it sounds like she's got some answers. And maybe you'd like to, because you know what it is? This is as much about empowerment and being able to
Mm.
be present in moments that matter, moments with your family. You can't even imagine how often everybody, but women especially, how often our thoughts are consumed by food or regret over what we ate or what are we going to eat next and how is it going to be in line or not in line with our diet. That stuff plagues us. And I would find it was plaguing me when I was playing with my little boys. That's not
Mm.
right. I want
Right.
to make people, I want to give people a feeling of freedom around that. And by getting control and bringing in a team, and it can just be a hyper local team, your husband, your partner, your friend, that is how you dismiss all of that and get. I always say my brain is not a place I should go without adult supervision. Sometimes I need a little help up there.
The focus of our work is on how one can gamify things to make them fun, to make them enjoyable. And what I can see is that the way that you've structured this is very much in alignment with what we do. It's like people having a heartfelt connection and want to support you. In our nomenclature, we refer to them as fans, what we say is that these are the people in life that you at least want to let down. And I love how eloquently you've actually created that in your nomenclature and given it this process that I think is quite frankly life-changing, not just at the physical level, but as you identified it as so many other levels. Let me ask you in closing, if there was, one piece of sagely advice, and I'm sure that you have more than one piece of sagely advice, but if there was like one takeaway, because we're always taking a look at, well, what can our audience, after they learn and hear, what can they do? Like, what could a person do to get started down this path? What do you think would be one of the most important actions that people can take?
Well, obviously, I'm going to say that the first thing to do is just to raise your hand and ask for help. The more you try to do it alone, the more we get stuck in that cycle of shame. The second thing I just have to say, I'm sorry to give you two, you asked for one, but I got to say this. The
Sure.
beauty and life's success comes in finding the pause button on your remote, not always acting impulsively, being able to take a beat and make a better choice. So I really do encourage meditation and mindfulness as part of a holistic practice. And I think high performing executives tend to be the first ones to dismiss it and say, well, I don't have the time for that. Well, that's exactly why you need to do it.
That is phenomenal. Well, I'm greedy. I'll take two if you're generous enough to offer two. So Jamie, I have to let you know that again, we really are big fans of yours. I've had a chance to, touch through our work millions of lives, but more directly through coaching, thousands and thousands of lives. And just the issues that you bring up are so top of mind for people. And yet it's not like we're taught really in school or necessarily in families. What is the optimal way to handle this? And you really have done a tremendous job of making this reachable for everyone. I do want to say that I hope that this is not the last time that we'll have an opportunity to learn from you, because I really do see this as more of a journey than a destination. And for those individuals who, again, would like to know more about your work, would you maybe just let them know how they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. So I am NYC Fit Fam on Instagram, and that's really where I field so many questions and requests, and I'm happy to communicate there. I do also have a website. It is thebigaskmethod.com.
I have to say, an absolute pleasure. I am thinking guilty thoughts right now about what I ate on Father's Day, but we'll put that to the side.
It's no guilt. There's no room
No
for shame
guilt.
or guilt. We just
No
pick up the pieces and keep it moving.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. We look forward to our future conversation.
Thank you so much, my friend.